We are live. Good afternoon, everyone in the UK, and hello to anyone around the world who's tuning in or catching up on the recording. Welcome to episode 2 of No More Pea Soup, a show about that moment when you know you have to change your life and you can't go back to life as it was, and the road ahead can look scary. And today I am delighted to be in conversation with a gentleman I met in Phoenix, Arizona, and he sidled up to me and said, "Can I get a picture with you?" They were the first words he ever said to me. And we were at an amazing event together back in January, and I just loved what Laban Ditchburn does with courage. He is known as the world's best courage coach. And I'm going to hand over to you, Laban, to tell us a little bit about that handle that you've got, the world's best courage coach, and what led you to that place.
Well, it's so great to reconnect with you, Fiona, and I have to applaud the work that you're doing, and it's so very important in the current day and age. And it's I don't meet too many ladies that are focused on this masculinity and empowering men to lead and to do what we're really engineered evolutionarily to do, right? But I think the world's best courage coach, and I have shared this story a few times, but if you haven't heard it, it's really great, because the world's best courage coach is zero to do with ego. And it was inspired by a Steve Hardison event, a phone conversation that him and I had, and then further conversations with a gentleman by the name of Chris Doris, who's the main protagonist in the TBO NIT NFL video that Steve Hardison speaks about. And really, that was September in 2021. It's a commitment that I make to myself every single day now, Fiona. It's how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself? And it's really had the most wonderfully profound effect on my life and the lives of the people that have also been declaring themselves the world's best. And we're just getting started, and it's so lovely to have figured out something this early on in my life, 41 years young, that's had such a profound impact on me. And allowing people to step into their greatness and to destroy this tall poppy syndrome that is endemic in the UK and New Zealand and Australia. And what's so interesting was I was talking to a gentleman yesterday. He's a really successful businessman based out of Arizona, real estate guy. And he was in New Zealand for a holiday 10 years ago. And he took some 1-minute recordings of local New Zealanders and asked them what it was that was so great about being a Kiwi. And one of the statements was, we don't allow tall poppies here. And I just thought, that is everything that's wrong with that country right now, because we need tall poppies more than ever. And that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And what I love in what you're saying is that message of being the world's best courage coach is an internal message for yourself. It's that declaration piece. It's who am I being today? Today I'm being this. And that's such a beacon for people to grow from. Of who are you being the best at today? What's your best being? And I absolutely love that. And I know you have a book, and I know I've read through some of it. I haven't, I'm sorry, finished the whole book. But your story is so inspiring, because you weren't always the world's best in a positive way throughout your life. You might have been the world's best at certain things, but it wasn't serving your life well. So would you just delve a little bit into your past and that moment where you went, actually, I can't live this way anymore. I have to make some change.
Yeah, look, and a very quick distinction as well. If you are to find your own world's best, find something that is non-quantifiable, intangible, and is the positive opposite of whatever problem you're solving in the world. For example, my purpose is to alleviate fear from people. Well, what's the opposite of that? Courage. World's best courage coach. So it's not world's best 100-meter sprinter, because that is a quantifiable, result. So that's really important. But really, 6.5 years ago was my moment of rock bottom, and I bounced along the floor of rock bottom for a little while and sort of ground to a halt, and I got sick of how it made me feel. And I looked at my life, and I remembered being a young man having such, you talk about offline how much of a visionary I am. And I imagined this extraordinary life for myself, and I was like, man, this is so misaligned. I'm so far from where I thought I was going to be as a young man. And that was one of the first times in my life that I sort of went towards what was most terrifying. And I struggled with drinking and drugs and gambling, and I was heavily promiscuous, and I would cheat on partners, and I had an autoimmune disease, and I was fat, and I was lazy. But like on the surface of it all, my life looked pretty good. Like I had a good job, and my boss liked me and my colleagues liked me, and I'd paste happy birthday on people's Facebook pages and did all the right things, right? But my life was a effing disaster zone. And I reached out for help, and I asked for help so that I could remain strong, not so that I appeared weak. And your interview with Nicholas T. Smith, there was a quote from Brené Brown, and you're talking about courage and vulnerability have to go hand in hand. And really, the courage that I've developed is by manifesting huge amounts of vulnerability. Anyone that's known me for the last 6 months can attest to how easily I share stories of some really confronting stuff, not just with me, but with Anna and I. But it holds no dominion over me anymore. And I found my purpose. When you go through such adversity, you develop a particular set of skills. Yeah, I will find you, and I will kill, like Liam Neeson, right? And
do you think that vulnerability piece, for men particularly, is why they keep the secrets that they keep around how their life is going so badly on the inside, yet from the outside looks, oh hey, he's having a great time. He's this, that, all the external indicators look like you're doing pretty good.
Culturally, growing up in New Zealand, being weak, and I use that term loosely, being vulnerable was a sign of weakness. And not surprisingly, New Zealand men and women have some of the highest rates of suicide. Yeah. And for a lucky country that's got it all, it's outrageous. And they drown their terror and fears with alcohol and drugs and being miserable. And
when I first read the Brené Brown's work on this, it was lovely because I love how the world kind of gives you examples. And I was at a burlesque event, and so I'd been reading about this courage and vulnerability piece, and it was a burlesque event, lovely girls dancing, comedians. It was a great evening, and the last act to come on was a woman named Glory Pearl. And so the compere kind of went, oh, okay, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Glory Pearl. And this woman walked on. She was in her mid to late 40s, possibly. She was wearing a little red pillbox hat and a beautiful pair of red shoes, and nothing else. Not a stitch, not a tassel, nothing at all. And she stood on the stage and she said, feast your eyes. And I went through a whole load of comparison. Oh my God, where do I look? Can I look at her fanny? Should I look at her boobs? I don't know. Oh my goodness. It was very it was very confronting, and I'm sure it was very confronting for everyone in that audience. She then went on to read comical poetry about various parts of her body, which I won't go into because there might be children watching, but it was very funny. But what struck me was how she was being, in equal measure, courageous and vulnerable. Right there in front of my eyes, there it was. Complete. How courageous do you have to be to walk onto a stage stark naked, except for a pair of shoes and a hat? How vulnerable she was, just in all her glory as a woman. She was curvy and shapely, and she wasn't like she didn't have the perfect, and I use that air quotes for a reason. It wasn't the perfect body. It was a woman's body. And she was amazing. And I just loved that as a living example of how to embrace both those things together.
Well, I think confidence is really attractive in men and women. And what you've triggered in my mind, Fiona, is this my former life, which still pops up from time to time, I suppose, in various ways. I was a validation seeker. And a lot of people in this community, a lot of people that get into coaching have gone through major trauma, and they're still at various levels through the journey. And I wonder whether this act of vulnerability and sharing unabashed has been sort of developed by this validation seeking that we used to do. Because I used to use self-deprecating humor and do all the things to try and get people to like me, and did a couple of stand-up comedy things as well, which I look back at and just shake my head in disbelief at how I used to speak about myself, And that's one thing I don't do anymore. I don't use any negative self-talk ever about myself. And that makes a big difference.
Ooh, but I wonder more about that.
Yeah, so
really
there's the validation seeking, but the reason for the no negative self-talk, and it's not that I am delusional about who I am, not at all. When you remove all negative self-talk, you become hyper dialed in about how other people talk about themselves and you at times. Then you can make an informed decision about whether you want them in your life. And as it turns out, I didn't want the people that I used to kick around with in my life because of how they spoke about themselves and how they spoke about others.
So what was the turnaround when how did life change when you stopped the self-deprecating talk?
Oh, it's magnificent because you would start attracting higher vibration human beings, because how I am now, I don't hang around people that speak ill of the world and doom and gloom and misery and all this other stuff. I'm like, GTFO, right? Like, see you later. And I've become very good at setting clear boundaries by not allowing those people in my life. And you got to be cruel to be kind in this context, I think.
Yeah. We've got a question coming from Matt. Question for Laban. View on fear and courage. Is courage the banishment and absence of fear or fearlessness? Where's my question gone? Or the acceptance of fear and still doing what's needed? Great question, Matt.
Yeah, it is a brilliant question, and it's interesting because I don't and haven't spent a long time trying to get to the root cause of the meanings of all this stuff so that I can provide analytical data to people, right? It's very intuitive, but I would lean towards the latter. And fear is a powerful tool, but really fear is an unknown. It's the unknown that makes it fearful. It's like if you were to speak on stage for the first time in your life, it's terrible. Like most people would rather die. But for me, it's like, I'm familiar with it now. Going on a podcast, being interviewed on whatever it might be. So, great question. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think this is fear. Is fear an absolutely normal part of life when we don't know the outcome?
See, I think fear plays a super duper important role. But given what I've learned about the world, we are doing things to our body through diet, environment, and stress that exacerbate the cortisol response. So there's, and Nick was talking about his struggles with mental health in the past as well. Like, one of the most prolific things that have improved in my life, excuse me, since I sorted out my diet, was my mental health's gone through the roof. My resilience has gone through the roof. My ability to stay calm. And it's all directly linked to how my blood sugar responds and getting the right amino acids and all the other stuff, right? We'll talk about this another time. But so many people are living in a state of what they think is fear, but it's actually the body's just dysregulated because they're super stressed out. They're doing jobs they hate. They're in relationships with people they hate, like this, they've got kids they hate, whatever it might be. And I think you got to start stepping back and looking, go, well, is this actually fear or is my life just miserable? And when I look back at my own experience, for the most part, my life was miserable because of what I was doing to myself.
So it was a kind of a, one thing was creating the other. So by the way you were treating your physical body was making your physical body not operate well, which was creating a mental state, which was causing you to then treat your body.
Yeah, like if I was going to put 2 bags of cocaine up my nose over a couple of days and eat a few pills, 1,000 beers and some whiskey, and then wake up and feeling like I want to end my life, is that
really
like
surprising?
Right? Like, no shit, right? Excuse my French. And when you understand how the gut operates, like it's 85-90% of all the dopamine and the serotonin and the oxytocin that the body creates is in the gut. So when you destroy the gut environment by putting refined carbohydrates and seed oils and all the other garbage in there, it's no wonder. And I think once you eliminate those factors as best you can, then you can start dealing with, okay, is this a real concern or not? Now, when Anna and I first got together, not long after, well, basically the first time we consummated the relationship, she got pregnant and had an ectopic pregnancy that hemorrhaged and nearly killed her, right? We've been together for like 3 months at this point. Now, that was fear. But I stepped into my masculine role and I'm super proud of how I conducted myself. I asked every single person in that hospital, from the intern to the director, what they would do if that was their daughter or their wife. And we managed to get a reasonable outcome. But after that, I crashed. My God, I was emotionally wiped out. And there's something in that. I think like that was 2 weeks of the most intense stress that I was going through. And I made the decision to start my own business just before that had happened. And there was a whole heap going on. But how I handled that versus how I would have handled that years ago was chalk and cheese.
How do you think you would have handled it years ago?
Alcohol, drugs, gambling, porn,
Numbing.
escape, numb.
Yeah.
I will admit, I think I pounded a whole heap of like ice cream after that experience. Like that was my thing. But like if that's the worst that happens, then
How do you look after yourself? I know you've mentioned diet is really important to you, and looking after your physical body. But how else do you look after yourself? Because a lot of the guys that I work with, they sacrifice a lot of themselves for the career, for the expectations, the family, that whole thing, and the things that they give up on are generally the things that make them happy. So whatever hobbies that most guys, I used to do this, I used to be a cyclist, I used to be a rock climber, I used to, and they stop doing it to be able to give more energy to their commitments, what they deem as their commitments. So how do you, and I don't actually like the word self-care very much, but how do you look after yourself?
it's a great word or great words. I Someone asked me what I did for fun the other day. I hadn't been asked that question for a while, and I was like, you know what? My life is effing fun. Like, I do what I love. I absolutely adore what I do. And now, ever since this World's Best Courage Coach mantra has come in, it's given me the absolute clarity. And so, do what you love. You've got an obligation to figure out what it is that you're on this planet to do. Because when you do that, you'll never work another day in your life, not in the same way. I'm not saying you won't get stressed out and there won't be challenges, but like, I worked in recruitment for 13 years, Fiona, and I said to someone last night, if you gave me the option of spending a year in jail or doing recruitment for a year, I'd rather go to jail. Like, that's how much I dislike it, right? Now, I'm three-quarter joking on that, but like, do what you love. Exercise and your time is not a luxury. It's a number one priority.
Right.
You in a heterosexual relationship, especially if you got family involved, you've got an obligation to lead. And this might ruffle a few feminist feathers, but like, biologically, evolutionarily, men are designed to lead. And it's not about domineering and all the other stuff. You get empowered by the feminine energy and you step into your masculine. That's what makes us attractive when we're stepping into our masculine and living our purpose. And men, there's nothing more attractive to your partner than figuring out your purpose. Trust me, you will definitely get some. And so do what you love. Like, exercise. Like, I've got a history of doing ultra marathons and the other stuff. Now, it's not something I do all the time, but I always make sure that I burn off some of that negative energy by exercise. You have to do it. Bodies
and I
are
think
designed.
testosterone plays a part in that. Testosterone is that grr hormone, and that needs to be used up, or I don't know how it works on a physical level, but it needs to be used in physicality.
Yeah. There's some other practical stuff scientifically. Like, when I look at the kind of feminine, like, cuckold little feminine little bitch that I was at times, and right, and I was, just in the way that I used to try and attract women and through getting them to like me and all this other stuff, right? But you've got to look at what you're eating. Like, there is soy products in everything. And you've got to get rid of that stuff out of your diet. It feminizes men. It really does. And these are not my ideas. This is hard data that exists. Like, sort your diet out. Get enough red meat. Like, don't believe all the bollocks around all the other stuff. Like, eat how how did my great-grandfather used to eat? You know what I mean? And you give your body the fuel that it needs to thrive. And the rest will really take care of itself, because it'll allow you to sleep. When you sleep and you get REM, you restore, you process your thoughts. You can be more measured. You know, when you're eating well, not eating a lot of carbs and crap, your blood sugar's stable, so your moods are a lot more stable. There's a number of things that you can do just to give yourself the winning edge without even really trying.
There's a lovely story, and I'm going to paraphrase horribly because I don't remember the exact details, but it's a story of a guy who he took over the team. I think it was the British Round the World race boat team, one of the big boat teams, and they weren't doing too well. And so he gave the entire team one question to ask themselves about everything they did. And the question was, will this make the boat go faster? So when they were about to dive into the ice cream or have another beer or go to bed late, well, you know, sit up scrolling, will this make the boat go faster? And if it doesn't make the boat go faster, don't do it. And they turned this whole team around by having the entire team just filter everything through will this make the boat go faster? And that's kind of what I'm hearing in what you're saying, is that's how you look after yourself, is by having a filter that says, is this going to make my boat go faster?
I love that, Fiona. And it's really important that people know, like, I, as a human being, still have a lot of work to do. And you know, not long after we arrived in Arizona, I started smoking cigarettes again. And after not having smoked for like 7 or 8 years, not a single one, right? And then I started smoking cigars when we were in Mexico, and I started inhaling them, and I got hooked again. So did Anna. And we've just given them up again. It's been 48 hours. I'm done. So out of alignment with who I am. And it's important to be honest about this stuff as well, because people would have seen me, and I've spoken about it on some other interviews. You know, I've been able to knock drinking and drugs and gambling and all these other things. It's like, how could cigarettes come back into my life? And I look back at what's happened over the last 6-7 months with what Anna and I have been doing. It's been incredibly stressful. Like, we fled Australia. I had to go via Germany. Anna was in Russia. We had to meet up in Mexico. Like, we left everything behind. We didn't plan on being away, forever. And so I had to be gentle with myself and just go, you know what, Laban, just have a few cigarettes. You'll come to a conclusion. Made me feel like garbage. The detox symptoms now are horrendous. I woke up this morning covered in an inch of sweat. My body's just going, ugh, get rid of it. And I'll be good to go in a couple of days. So I'm a work in progress.
And that's really encouraging, I think, for people who are watching this, because I think sometimes, you know, when you've achieved so much and you've turned your life around, and I love the title of your book, Bet on You. You've put your money where your mouth is and bet on yourself. It's really easy for people to stand back and go, yeah, well, it's all right for him because, you know, he's got whatever it takes. And it's really encouraging to hear that, you know, sometimes the path to your, you know, in the Giants and the Smalls book, that path to being a giant, we can get waylaid on the way and distracted and maybe take a few steps back, and trusting that you are on that path. And it is just a case of, yeah, well, I'm just going to get up, dust off, and keep going in the direction. To have a relapse is not the same as lapsing.
Yeah, I think treat yourself like someone you really care about. And if for anyone that's going to attack and say, you're smoking, you're doing this, it's like you need to check your own backyard before you start throwing stones, right? And it's made me a lot more empathetic to people's situations and a lot more understanding about the journeys that people are going through. Mm-hmm. And it's important that I lead by example. That was one of your questions in your quiz, you know, do you lead by example? And it's really important, particularly when you're doing what I'm doing for work, because there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than someone who's exposing this, you know, virtuous life, and then all of a sudden you see a recent photo of them and they're like, they put on all the weight that they, you know, like the guy that did the juice diet, the Australian guy, saw him recently, he stacked on all the weight again. It's like, so, and I realize people are going through their own journeys, but do you know what? It's great that I can just pull the trigger and go, right, cigarettes are be gone in Jesus' name. And then I'll be back running again. And because that's the thing, like when you reintroduce that stuff, it drains your energy. I wasn't anywhere near as productive. I need another hour of sleep a night. Treat yourself like someone you really care about.
Yeah, and have that little bit of forgiveness for yourself. Like, I forgive myself for having a lapse. It's okay. I did it. It's done. I'm not doing it now. And I just want to go back to Matt, who has, thank you for my chief researcher. The quote comes from Ben Hunt Davis, British rowing team, Sydney he's got 200, but I'm guessing 2000 Olympics was where the will this make the boat go faster? So I had got it completely wrong, but
we got it out in the end.
We got it there. So
it's really important. Will it make my rig go faster?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great question.
Absolutely. So what's in your future? What's the next chapter look like for you?
So this is a really interesting period of my life, Fiona, because I'm starting to become very dialed in about what it is that I want to achieve. And here's something that might come across in the wrong way, but I'm going to say it anyway. I haven't really thought about how I'm going to articulate this. I'm entering a phase in my life where I really feel like I'm breaking new ground, and I don't have too many examples to follow in this direction. And what it's done, it's created this environment where it's so exciting to be alive, because it's like I no longer take no for an answer, ever. And that's a really powerful place to be. There's like when I win the world's best courage coach, I started jumping on a few website domain names, and they're all available. And it's like, this has never happened before in the history of the world. Not that I'm aware of, maybe in the ancient Greeks, but there's no record of it. So maybe this is my time to shine and to lead a movement of creating the world's best and destroying this tall poppy syndrome bullshit that exists. How's that working out? What I'm seeing in the world right now is we have a lot of incompetence in our leaders, and we need to reclaim that back. We really do. There's otherwise the world will spin off its axis. But I'm confident that by focusing on sorting my own self out first, making sure that I'm well fed and watered and fit and wealthy and fulfilled, then I can go and attack the world. And that's going to be the subject of another book that I'm going to write.
So when you say you don't take no for an answer, there's two things that come into my head. One is, how do you respect other people's boundaries if you're not taking no for an answer? We can put that there. And the other one is that I'm hearing that you ask really powerful questions.
Yeah, so some context around taking no for an answer. It's not that if someone says no, don't touch me. I'm not. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with what society deems to be fact. And I'll give you an example, right? 20 different doctors and surgeons, all hand on heart, said to me, Laban, you have an incurable autoimmune disease. You will be on medication for the rest of your life. They didn't say, do you know what, Laban, it seems like this is the likely outcome. That we're like, we know. And anyone that decides to adopt that approach is dead to me, because you're an idiot. And don't ever tell me things that can't be done, because I am proving every single day that that's not true. You can't leave the country, Laban, during an international lockdown. Watch me. You can't travel internationally without being vaccinated. Watch me. Like, give me a real challenge. And I know this might ruffle a few feathers, but I've had to in order to survive. The rules of engagement have shifted with regards to me playing within those parameters from governmental decisions and all this other stuff. And I've come to figure out that most people in life have little to no clue about what they're talking about. How do I know that, Fiona? Because I have little to no clue about what I'm talking about, right? But I do know when I'm being lied to. And I write about this in my book. And having the humility to say, do you know what? I don't have all the answers, but I intuitively feel like this is the right way to go, but I'm open to ideas and suggestions. That's the way that I approach my life. And it's serving me really bloody well right now.
Yeah, so it's that not taking no for an answer is not having doors closed in your face, keeping possibility. And I relate. I had many years ago, I was completely infertile and was told, I had endometriosis, and was told, well, you'll be infertile, and the only cure is to cut everything away. And I had cysts in my belly like this. And I did the same. I was like, no, I'm not going for that. And I did some quite radical treatments. I did a 14-day urine fast. So now that's out there.
Like urine cycling?
Yeah.
So maybe talk about this a little bit more. And good on you for sharing this, because I know a little bit about this too. But can you just explain what you're talking about for the folks at home?
Yeah. So it was. I'd cleaned up my diet. Was one of the very first things I did. And And what it was, I lived in India, and urine therapy is quite common in India. It's quite a big thing. It's a very traditional form of medicine. And so lots of people had said to me, well, try urine therapy. And I was a bit kind of, that's a bit weird. So I found a book called Your Own Perfect Medicine, because a lot of the books about urine therapy was from scriptures, and they're quite sort of dated and a bit kind of woo-woo, and you just have to believe it's going to work. And this was written by a Western woman who was a doctor who'd really gone into the science behind what's going on. And I read her book, and I can remember crying in the first chapter, because she had gynecological issues, which is what had brought her to looking into urine therapy. So my condition had got to the point where I had hydronephrosis, which is where the cysts were so big, they were stopping the urine coming out of my kidneys, and it was killing my kidney.
Wow.
So it was kind of like, okay, you're really going to have to do something. So I gave myself a month. And in that month, I decided to hit it with everything I could. I saw every healer type of person I could lay my hands on. And I was very fortunate. I lived in a community of sort of hippie community, and there were lots of crystal healers and Reiki healers and acupuncturists. And so I just had a month of, I'm going to hit this with everything. So cleaned up my diet. In the first 14 days, I drank all the urine I passed during daylight hours. It was about a 12-hour light, 12-hour dark type of place. So for all the daylight hours, just, and as you say, cycled it through. So you just like drinking water and urine and water and urine. And then at night I would not drink it. And in that 14 days, essentially what's happening is that your urine is a blueprint of what your body is not using. So as it comes out, it says, okay, these are the vitamins, minerals, whatever has been going in. This is what your body hasn't used. So let's put it back in. And your body keeps reading the information, and it adjusts and changes and works out what's going on. And after 14 days, most of the symptoms, I was very cold because the kidneys were being affected. Those sorts of things. And I was in India, it was blooming hot and I was cold. So all of those symptoms had started to shift and change. I had the most incredible amount of energy, not physical energy. I wouldn't have wanted to yomp up a hill or anything, but I had this like vitality in me. And then I continued then I sprayed my body with urine and drank everything and did I was a delight, cleaned my teeth with it, everything. But actually it was no worse than drinking warm, salty water, because I wasn't putting any toxins in. There was nothing. It was just getting purer and purer and purer. And then I continued to drink my urine for the entire month. And I went back to my doctors, and all they would say to me when they did the ultrasound was, it appears to be in remission. And so that was February. That was the whole of the February. And I then went to see a Tibetan doctor in the Himalayas, and she gave me a whole load of pills that were blessed by lamas and various different things. And she looked at me and she said, if you're not going to do this, I'm not going to see you. You either commit to this or leave the office. She was a nun, a Tibetan nun, and she meant business. And so I agreed to doing it because I was totally committed to healing myself. And that by the November I was pregnant.
That's so great.
And so my son he's now nearly 21. So
what's your son's name?
Luca.
My name is Luca.
Yeah.
That's so great. Is that where No More Pea Soup comes from?
No more pea soup. No.
So you have probably blown a number of people's minds, and I'm so grateful that you shared that, Fiona, because there is hard data and science backing this stuff. Because I've done a little bit as well, and what you experienced scientifically, you were in a deep ketogenic state. Your body was just burning fat, which is really helpful. Endometriosis, prostate issues in men, and snoring, and a number of other things are driven by excessive amounts of refined carbohydrates. Just FYI. So it makes perfect sense that your body was able to repair without medicine and giving it, something that seems outrageous, and people might be spewing into their Weet-Bix, which you shouldn't be eating because
they guy on the first date.
Well, it's a great way to work out whether he's a good match or not, because it's like this is the life that we live, right? And this is not taught in any medical school. They would warn you that it's dangerous, right? And look what happened.
So my 20-week scan when I was pregnant with my son, I was now in Thailand, and I went for a 20-week scan. And I said, while you're there, can you check for cysts? And I've still got the original ultrasounds of these cysts, and they were melon size. They were huge.
Oh my God.
And at 20 weeks, they said, no, there's no cysts in your body at all. We cannot find anything other than a baby. And I have never had a repeat of endometriosis, and women suffer so badly from this. It's so painful. It's such a dreadful disease. And the doctors all go, no, there's nothing really we can do. The only cure is to get pregnant, and you generally can't get pregnant because you got endometriosis. So it's
there's a great example of not doing what you're told. Congratulations. Bravo.
Yeah. I wasn't going to be, and that's why I love it. That's why I kind of picked up on what you were saying. I wasn't going to be told that the only answer was to take away the organs that fundamentally make me female.
Can you imagine how outrageous a statement that is, and how flippant they are with this stuff? And as I'm becoming more awake to the world and how it operates, and learning a few things, you need to be in my level of health in order to cope with it. Because if you're not, I can see why people end their lives. I have learned some nefarious mother flipping things about this planet that we're on, and knowledge is power, and I'm glad that I know them. I wouldn't want to live in a state of ignorance, but you need to maintain your health and well-being and mindset in order to be able to manage this process, because it's heavy, some of it, real heavy. But it allows hope as well. I'm very optimistic for the future.
Yeah, me too. Despite what's going on in the world at the moment, I'm very optimistic for the future.
Well, that's a really important point. Despite what's going on in the world, what is actually going on in the world versus reality versus what we're told? And what I'm coming to learn is that it's like 1% of really what's going on. And I've been blessed to do quite a lot of travel, and I've been to places like, I've been to China, I've been to Colombia and Peru and Cuba and India and Sri Lanka and a whole heap of other places around the world, and witnessed firsthand what is then reported on in other parts of the world. Two very different outcomes. So focus on what you can control is really important. Don't get caught up in all the malarkey of everything else. And sort your own backyard out first before you try to fix everyone else's.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about self-love, because my impression of you is that you've gone from a space of kind of self-hatred and damaging yourself as much as you possibly could in as many ways as you possibly could, to a space of absolute self-acceptance and self-love.
Yeah, I have. I have. I do. I love the man that I've become and becoming, and you have to be okay with what you've done. You have to forgive yourself, because it was really when I forgave myself and then other people that I was able to love myself. And then when that happened, I created the space for Anna to come into my life. And having Anna, having your dream, literally every single box. And we both wrote lists basically at the same time before we met each other of exactly what we wanted, not what we didn't want. And having someone who steps into her feminine, empowers me with her feminine energy, and allows me to lead in the way that I lead, and then I can support her in her endeavors. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy. That's an incentive to love yourself and forgive yourself. Because if you don't, you'll only attract people that haven't either. And Anna's the woman that I knew I wanted to meet my whole life, but was beginning to think I never would. And I was 38. I thought I was done. Never been married before, no kids. I thought I was cooked. And but it was the you know what, Laban? I forgive you. I love you. It's a very powerful thing. And forgiveness is not about absolving people of responsibility at all. If I've done things that have consequences, I've got to manage those, right? Thankfully, I never did anything that landed me in jail, or killed anyone, or really badly hurt anyone.
It was really just yourself you were hurting.
Yeah, emotionally, a few ex-girlfriends that I hurt, but that was part of their learning journey as well. And I've apologized, and I wonder if any of them are going to read my book, because I've apologized to a couple of them in there.
Send them a copy.
But the forgiveness component is for ourselves. And I had a guy on my podcast, Dr. Fred Luskin, who founded the Forgiveness Project, Stanford Forgiveness Project. And, he talks about reuniting Auschwitz survivors with the camp commander. Captain Charlie Plum, who was captured by the Viet Cong and held in the Hanoi Hilton for 6.5 years, reconnected back in Vietnam with the camp commander, who never actually apologized, but Charlie forgave him. And he was the one. Charlie Plum's in his late 70s now. He's the most chill dude you've ever met. You won't get him frustrated getting stuck in a traffic jam, because that mother flipper was stuck in a cell without any sunlight for 4.5 years of the 6 years he was there. Wow. It's all relative, right?
So is forgiveness for you? What I'm hearing is that forgiveness is for yourself.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, right? There's family members of mine that I don't get on well with at all. And it's to do with the fact mainly that they operate from a victim mindset. And then a lot of it stemmed from unrequited, I was giving them unrequited help, particularly my older brother. But anyway, 3 years, 18 months, and 3 years were the time frames, respectively, for my older brother, my youngest, older half brother, youngest half sister, and an auntie. And before my book launch, I was like, oh man, this is we don't have any academic history in our family, or really, I think my sister was the only one that has a degree. And I was like, this is a big moment. I don't want to deny my brother and sister and auntie an opportunity to turn up at something that can never be done again. I'm really proud of this book. There's some amazing people that they can see, that they can, and so I sent all of them apology messages. And I wrote the same message and just changed their name for each one of them. And it was along the lines of, hey bro, I'm sorry for whatever I said in the past that caused a breakdown in our relationship. I've been doing a lot of work on myself and blah, blah, blah. And I've got this book launch, and I would hate for you to miss out. I'd love for you to attend if you can. We don't need to be best friends or whatever. And all three of them responded. None of them apologized back. And I got angry. And then Anna brought to my attention, she's like, you sent that conditionally. You sent that, and I was like, ah. So I sent another apology message saying, oh, I'm sorry. I sent that with conditions on it. Look, you don't need to apologize back. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. If you want to turn up the thing, great, right? My older brother, we got on a phone call. He was still very much in victim mode. He kind of eked out an apology, which felt about as genuine as margarine. My youngest sister did turn up to the event. And just the other day, my auntie, who's completely nuts, she's very unhealthy, but she's nuts. She sent me a message. A famous cricketer, Shane Warne, just passed away. Yeah. And that reminded her of me. And she sent me a nice message saying, hey, I was thinking about you when Shane Warne passed away. And so but what it did, Fiona, is that I don't think about these three anymore. Like I would spend time going, oh, why wouldn't they just do, now I don't think about it anymore. So I'm not expending any of that emotional energy. So for me, I'm like, oh, see you later. And whatever happens from here, because I'm good at setting clear boundaries, I won't allow victim mindsets into my life for any period of time. It's like, how's that working out for you? You're 50-year-old, miserable, single, living at home with mum. Like, how's your life versus how's mine? If you want to see how things are operating, if you want my help, ask me. But you didn't want it in the past, so I'm going to wait. And it's been really powerful, Fiona, really powerful and humbling at the same time.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've got so many questions I want to ask you. They're kind of stacking up in the back of my mind. We could go on for a couple of hours here, you know. So I want to come back to Anna, your beautiful love, and when you were talking about how her being in her feminine allows you to embrace your masculine, and an analogy I've looked at a lot is, you know, the yin yang symbol, and in most part we look at it as a two-dimensional kind of little mango shaped black and a white, and there's a dot of the opposite color in each one. And I was talking to somebody who spent a lot of time in China, and she said to me, it's not actually a two-dimensional thing. It's a three-dimensional. It's like a ball. And so the division is the same, but it's fluid. And so when the masculine yields, the feminine expands, and when the feminine yields, the masculine expands. And it's in a constant state of flow. And I think as people, this beautiful dance between the masculine and feminine, when it's in that fluid state, allows us to have the love that you're talking about, that you have with Anna, that she allows you your masculinity, which is your dominant part, but probably also allows your femininity as well.
Well, I've never heard it described like that, but that is brilliant. And it really does align with how I feel about our relationship. And I'm sure if you had Anna on, you could ask her the same question. She'd agree. It is really important. It is fluid. And what it has allowed me to do, Fiona, is that she says yes to everything. And that's within reason. She says yes because I think there's an inherent trust in knowing that I can facilitate a miraculous outcome or get a great outcome.
So it's a powerful yes.
It's like, let's move country. Yes. Like, not should we move countries? You know, like that. And it's like, let's move country. Like I rely on my intuition. And incidentally, ever since I got my health sorted, my gut instinct is unbelievable.
Because your gut health is unbelievable.
Right? It's been validated time and time again, especially recently. And I don't know, there's just something about Anna and I's relationship is we have challenges like anyone else, but we speak to each other in ways that are not going to be regretted in the future.
Oh, I love that.
right?
Speak to each other in ways that are not going to be regretted in the future.
Because I used to do that with, I write about this lady, let's call her Tulip, in the book. And I, she was a Zimbabwean virgin at 30 and gave me the option to exit the relationship after dating for 5 weeks, after telling me that she was saving herself for marriage. She was a Christian girl. And I waived the right, and then I spent, the next 12 months trying to bang her. And then got so rejected and agitated that I was like insulting her religious and cultural beliefs in the village she grew up. Like, it was like, oh, your religion, your cultural beliefs are stupid. And like, can you imagine being on the receiving end of that? Like, God, hear horrible stuff. And you can't unsay that. That killed it. That killed it, right? There's no respect for myself and then no respect for her. So be very, very, very intentional about the language that you use for someone that you truly care about.
Yeah.
And it's helped a lot.
Contempt is, I think, the emotion that is really hard to repair once you've instilled some contempt in somebody through your actions. Or I don't think that's a repairable relationship once you've reached that stage.
I don't think so. Anna's done a huge power of work on herself as well. And, if you've heard her story, how she's bounced back from that is just mind-boggling. And her levels of forgiveness for all the perpetrators involved as well, it's unbelievable. She's like, I'm the world's best coach, but she's the most courageous person I've ever met. And I love saying that because it's so true.
Yeah. Wow. So if you had one thing that you wanted to share specifically with the men that are listening, where do they start if they're unhappy, if they're living a life of internal conflict or compromise, they're not living into their best selves? Where do they start?
Best advice is find it from people that have legitimately achieved what you want to achieve. Do not take advice from people or books that haven't achieved what you are hoping to achieve. I see this all the time. Columnists, people write books and they contradict themselves. It's like, I empowered myself with the knowledge of books and interviews. There's some amazing books, No More Mr. Nice Guy and a few other things. Like you gotta like go back to is this going to make the boat go fast? Is this going to make my masculinity go faster? And don't take unrequited advice from people that have no experience in doing this. And most of the work I do with coaching is men that, similar to me, grew up without functional masculine role models that just were either children of divorce like I was or, adopted out, abandonment issues. Like, seek counsel and advice from people that have proven it. That's just what I would say. That'll save you a lot of heartache.
Yeah. There's a quote from Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings where he says, and again, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's something along the lines of, advice is a very dangerous thing, even from the very wise. And
that is a brilliant quote, especially with what's going on in the world.
Yeah. So it's about finding the support, isn't it? To take yourself on the journey you need to go on, rather than going on someone else's journey, or it's getting the right guidance to go on that journey yourself. Yeah,
and I think, you're right. And there's going to be some tough decisions you might have to make. You might have to exit the relationship you're in. You got to be prepared to walk away from things that aren't serving you well, really, because weak men attract domineering women, and that's what happened to my father. And then my mum, who grew up in a deeply dysfunctional home, was attracted to that weakness, and it just makes for a outrageously terrible dynamic. And then my father did it again, and then he's basically retired miserable. One of the most unhappy people I know, and incidentally one of the most unhealthy, and doesn't want a lick of any of my insight, can't bring himself to do it. And I'm like, see you later, alligator. You know how to find me. But I'm like, that might sound harsh, but it's just reality. It is what it is, right?
And you go back to the Power of the Masculine Archetypes tool the quiz that I have that you filled in earlier. You have a very established and powerful king archetype, and he is the archetype of boundaries and of holding that space of greatness for all. Everyone in his realm benefits from him being in his power. It's not about dominion over others, it's about dominion over the self. And that's where that king leadership is so powerful. And I really feel it in your masculinity, that you have this very strong king, very reliable king archetype.
Well, it means a lot, Fiona. I really appreciate you saying that, and I think the act of sharing that with your partner or someone that you are a friend with, that you recognise that they are doing great things in this space, you let them know. Let them know. It's because it's a constant growth project.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that, because it helps tremendously. So thank you for what you do and how you do it as well. You are a magnificent feminine warrior.
Queen of Kings.
Amen.
And Laurie's she's just said, you've just blown her mind with weak men attract domineering women. And that's such a toxic relationship to get into. And when you talk to the women who are domineering, the one thing they really want is they want their men to be empowered. They don't want to take on all the responsibility. They do it because they feel they have to.
Do you know the demographic of people that are the most unfulfilled, the most miserable, and I think have some of the highest suicide rates? 45-year-old childless single women. And you can interpret that however you like. You can get triggered by that statement. It makes perfect sense. And it's to do with women that have prioritized a career. And so relationships have gone by the wayside or whatever, and not having kids or whatever. And they feel like they've missed that opportunity to fulfill that feminine procreation. There's a whole lot of evolutionary things that are coming into play here that are outside of our control, I think. And let that be a lesson. Let that be a lesson.
Well, we're seeing, medically, there's evidence that says that the testosterone levels of women are increasing, which means fertility is dropping. And it comes back to what you were saying right at the beginning about looking after your body and what you eat and how you think. We are not a brain and a body, and it all works together. And what affects one thing expresses in other areas. So who we're being if we're going to, I'm speaking, I guess, for women, if we're going to be very masculine in our actions, we're going to create the masculinity within ourselves at a physical level.
Yeah, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work long. It's not sustainable. And men have an obligation to step into our masculinity so that women don't have to. And that dynamic, and
And what you said about Anna bringing out the masculinity in you then, by being in your masculine, bring out the femininity in her. So it's a win-win.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%.
Win-win. All round.
100%.
So thank you. I'm aware we are just over time. I could talk to you all afternoon, Laban. I could talk to you all afternoon, but thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. And I hope to do it again sometime.
Yeah, well, I might have been tethered on my appearances on the Wake Up with the Giants TV, but hopefully people are getting some value from it. It's just that I'm available at the moment, and I love sharing some of these ideas. I'm so glad that you took it the direction that you did, and love you for doing what you're doing, and keep up the great work, would you?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'll see you on the other side. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. And if you're catching the playback, we will look at some of the questions a little later. Bye-bye.
Bye.